Welcome to Futures Hub, the podcast that ignites curiosity and navigates the pathways to tomorrow. I'm Mia, your guide on this journey into the future, where we explore the art of foresight, community co-creation, and personal growth. In each episode, we dive deep into innovative techniques to unlock the potential to shape our individual capacities and contribute to vibrant communities. Whether you're a seasoned futurist or just dipping your toes into the world of foresight, let's embark on this journey together. Welcome to Futures Hub. Welcome back to the Futures Hub podcast, where we explore the intersection of foresight, co-creation, and community engagement to imagine futures for all. I'm your host, Mia, and in today's episode, we get to meet two creative technologists and immersive storytellers, Lorna Okeng and Emmanuel Rukundo. Lorna and Emmanuel are creative technologists with a deep interest in alternative futures, new frontiers of storytelling, cultural diplomacy, and technology experimentation. Their work sits at the intersection of art, including visual art, design, and music, disruptive technologies, including generative AI, augmented reality, and virtual reality, and societies and culture applying systems and futures thinking approaches to push the boundaries of creative expression. They are the producer and director of Uganda's first virtual reality film, Keepers of the Forest, the Batwa Legacy, and are 2024 Next Generation Foresight Practitioner Fellows at the School of International Futures. Lorna and Emmanuel's groundbreaking VR film, Keepers of the Forest, shines a light on the Batwa people, the original custodians of the Bwindi and Virunga mountain ranges, home to half of the world's mountain gorillas. Once evicted from their ancestral forest, the Batwa story is one of resilience, ecological wisdom, and the urgent need to preserve intangible heritage before it disappears. Through virtual reality, Lorna and Emmanuel have captured that wisdom, not just as art, but as a call to action for how Indigenous knowledge can shape our collective futures. In our conversation, we explore the film's deep co-creation process, what it means to represent intangible heritage through immersive technology, and how Africa's past and ancestral intelligence can guide the future of conservation, climate action, and cultural diplomacy. This conversation is one about memory, imagination, and the power of technology to reconnect us with the stories that sustain us. Let's dive in. Welcome, Lorna and Emmanuel. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Futures Hub podcast. I've been so excited for our conversation. Can you two tell us a little bit about yourselves and how the Keepers of the Forest project began?
The idea of Keepers of the Forest started a while back when I was tinkering with extended reality digital tools and seeing how to maximize them. And COVID-19 had hit and our work was disrupted. Where I come from, it's a very beautiful place. And it's a home of half of the world's mountain gorillas. Whenever I'm home, I always wished I could bring people to experience this. But it would take a lot to achieve that. So I thought, why not start with telling a story about this place, the beauty and the people, and using this immersive technology. And VR came to mind. So when we decided to dig deep and research about the place and the story, we found there was this indigenous tribe that lived in this forest for a very long time. And they were evicted, yet they played a very big role in conserving the forest, which the gorillas are now thriving in today, which is a major tourist attraction. So we decided to research and learn. We're also passionate about African heritage in all its forms and arts. It inspires design and print and everything. As we dove deep into researching, we started to discover there's so much of our intangible heritage that is not portrayed in traditional media formats. And we also got to learn a lot about indigenous knowledge systems and how these people live their life in that indigenous way, and how we can also learn from those systems to inspire us to shape our future systems. We figured, let's start with a film that highlights this story, and we kept tinkering along the way, got some partners on board, and here we are. We came up with a VR film. That's an intro in a nutshell. It's been a learning process all the way. We started to learn about futures, immersive storytelling, and all these things. It's been quite a journey.
We're both creative technologists and immersive curators. I'm also a researcher deeply invested in the future of Africa's digital creative economy and culture diplomacy and soft power. We are really big on technology experimentation. A lot of my work largely sits at the intersection of art, tech, and culture. He really deeply invested in alternative formats of storytelling. But our leading question that sets the tone for the context that Emma has already provided is, where is African heritage? Where is it formed? That question really stems from the research, especially in the Western lens, that a lot of Africa doesn't have history. African history was never documented. But the more we probed on the question around where is African heritage, the more we found that a lot of African heritage is intangible. So it's not really captured in the traditional formats of documentation. We're not going to find it in large museums or artifacts, but you're going to find it buried in formats that you may not necessarily see with the eye. There's a statistic that came out in 2018, 2019, where it stated over 90% of African artifacts live in Western museums and private collections. And yes, that could be in the format of tangible artifacts, the traditional formats of documenting history in museums. But the more we probe further, we found that the intangible elements were not necessarily captured. So where truly then is African heritage? I'm speaking loosely for Africa as a continent. I know that Africa is 56 countries, but I think the peculiarity and the beauty of our culture is also the similarity and the cross-pollination across. Going back to the artifacts, the more you probe the artifacts, the drum was never a drum. A Buganda drum was not the same as a Ndebele drum. It was not the same as a Shona drum. Each drum had a particular story, and that story was never fully captured in the traditional formats of archiving. So where would we then find that history or that heritage? It's buried around us. It's in our music, it's in our food, it's in our dance, it's in our braiding our hair, it's in our tattooing and body scarring, it's in our music, it's in our fashion. That is the museum. It's in the places we sleep, the places we walk. It's everywhere. So it's like a museum you can't necessarily touch, but it's there. So the idea of the traditional physical museum, that's a collection of objects, may not necessarily translate accurately to capture and document the vast formats of our heritage. Our heritage is largely intangible. So then the real question is, how then do you represent intangible heritage? We found the traditional formats limiting, and at that point, immersive storytelling comes alive because a lot of our cultural formats of storytelling were immersive, whether it's an elder singing a song or it's around a fireplace, or it was a dance, it was an invitation to collaborate, it was a show, don't tell. When we landed on VR and AR and these immersive formats, we were like, that's really the closest to capture the immersiveness, the interactivity, the experiential, and the emotive formats in which our heritage is fluid. It's not here, it's not there. It's a museum of everything. It's a museum of everywhere, and it's not limited by space and time. I think that's truly where these tools, in their most rudimentary format, are metaphoric to the African formats of storytelling. And I think that's why they bring those stories alive really beautifully, because they are similar in format. It's emotive, it is experiential, it is a show, don't tell, it's an invitation to participate, and it is agency to navigate your realm. And that truly is why we found that this story had to be told with this particular tool. And I need to reemphasize that, again, it's simply a storytelling tool. But as Emma said, it was the power in the tool that gave us the room to do justice to this very important story that needed to be told at this particular time. We like to call it a love letter to the Batwa people, because it is how powerful Indigenous knowledge systems can be and how they can shape and influence the way we then look at alternative methods, whether it's design and the future's context. We're really looking at the past influencing the present to shape the future. And I really use the word love letter not in an extremely emotional way, but I feel like that's the only word that I can use to fully capture the depth and the vastness and the beauty of knowledge that has been buried for a very long time. Our job is really to bring that story, like make it come alive. The story of the Batwa and their century-long philosophies and ideologies in governing and protecting and conserving the Virunga Rwenzori ranges, which is the only home of the mountain gorillas, but also an extension of the wider Congo basin, which holds about 23% of the world's carbon sink. It is these custodians of the forest who we all need as a world to thank, because they have lived thousands and thousands of years in this forest, in harmony with them, preserving them. But those alternative methods of conservation never appear in traditional fora. You won't find it at COP. You're not going to find it at the UN. You're not necessarily going to find it in research bodies of work in academia. We felt that story needed to be told, and it needed to be told now. So I hope that gives you a bit of context why we had to tell this story and why the time for telling it is truly now.
That's excellent context. And there's so much to unpack there too. The ways that you have been able to anchor into history in order to move toward the future, the ways that you've been able to partner with a specific tribe as you explore the vastness of heritage and culture. There's so many different places that we can go with this conversation, but I don't want to stray too far before we speak first about the Batwa people, who you've termed as the keepers of the forest. Emma, you had alluded to how you had wanted to anchor into this particular region and this particular tribe, but how did that collaboration come to be? How did the Batwa community get involved in shaping the film's narrative, and how did that partnership look like as you started to discuss both the history and the future and the creation of this film?
One, the story is properly anchored in the research and the information we gathered. That's what we built the story on. And two, when we went to film in the community, we filmed with them. They literally directed. We were simply tools to bring the story to life. All the creative inspiration and the visual inspiration is thoroughly anchored in the story, the systems, right to even the immersion and interactivity, the gamification. Each of it is meaningful. We really brought it out as raw as possible, but in a very creative way that captures everything: the splendor, the challenge, the urgency of why we need to tell this story. It's thoroughly grounded in that. We didn't change anything. We simply carried the story and brought it to life in a way that does it justice.
In 1990, the Batwa were evicted from the forests as part of the conservation proposals of that time. The national park is reserved for the gorillas, and therefore human inhabitants had to leave. They've, for the past 30 years, had to assimilate with the neighboring communities, but also not necessarily fitting in the context of abandoning all that they had known. Their centuries of life was thrown out the window, and they had to assimilate with an urbanized setting that they were put into. Right now is a hot topic, the climate crisis, that's definitely at the top of all stakeholders across the globe. And I think this learning came super alive post-COVID, knowing that humanity hadn't necessarily prepared for crisis. And now the whole world is just making sure such a catastrophe does not happen again. And the African context, the carbon credits is a hot element when it comes to policy and Africa's stake for a continent that contributes about 1% to the global climate change crisis. Going back to a country like Uganda, where about 90% of our agriculture is subsistence, we rely entirely on the rain. So any shift in climate has significant effects. Food security is heavily affected, whether it's famine, whether it's floods, whether it's drought, all of that is packaged with that. We in the global south are then the most vulnerable when we are talking about the devastating effects of climate change. Now, going back specifically to the Batwa people, their population right now is about 6,700. They are an endangered group. The assimilation caused them, one, to significantly lose their culture, but also to lose their identity, their ethnicity. And the challenge with that is when an elder dies, a library burns down with them. So there's the elderly group that's phasing out. And these are keepers of a certain interesting body of knowledge, which we are now discovering needs to be kept alive. But only 1.2% of Uganda's population is about 60 years. As a win-win for both was because they had such tremendous knowledge of the forest, they have been integrated as tour guides to support the Uganda Wildlife Authority in tourism. Tourists do come in and they take you through the forest all the way to the gorillas so that you have an understanding of what their life was. But right now it's fully packaged as a tourism experience. So what we were trying to do in this collaboration was largely amplifying their central role, not just tour guides, but subject matter experts in the domain of the forest. So whether it comes to natural medicine, whether it comes to human-animal interaction, whether it comes to human and the gorilla interaction and preservation, they definitely had very fantastic knowledge systems that can be borrowed and integrated into modern ways of conservation. The collaboration was making sure that their expertise comes to the light. They have full agency in the story they want to tell. And as Emma said, it was a full co-creation process. Our original script we threw out of the window, and we were just amazed with coming in there as mediums, storytellers, but the original owners of the story remain the Batwa people. You will see bodies of knowledge that may not be traditionally shared as part of the tourism experience to check out the gorillas.
That preservation of ancestral knowledge is so key. I think that your project is so interesting and unique in the way it uses ancestral knowledge in the context of foresight. Could you explain a little bit more about how you got involved in the foresight space? Was this the intention at the inception of the project that this would also be something that could be used to support futures in foresight work, or was it something that emerged along the way as the film was developed? How did that journey into foresight look for you in the context of Keepers of the Forest?
10 years ago, I was grappling with two questions. Where are African futurists and who is building for the Africa we want? In the traditional tech space, I was saying that a lot of the problems that we have today were probably the solutions of yesterday. And I started asking myself the question, what potential problem does my solution create? Africa for a very long time has played catch up. The world goes ahead and we find ourselves either innovating slowly or trying to play catch up with the world's innovation and technological revolution. So for me, it was largely what potential problem do our solutions they create, but also 30 years ago, who were the decision makers and who were coming up with some of the solutions that we have. I'll give an example. There was a campaign that was started in the early 90s around mass vaccinations to get rid of the killer disease, polio, measles, and there were a couple. And yes, the mortality rate significantly dropped. But 18 years later, you had a massive population boom. And now more than ever, our beloved president says that the reason young people don't have jobs today for a country with 70% youth is because we were immunized and we didn't die. It's a valid point that indeed they did immunize 30 years ago. And yeah, we didn't die. When that immunization was happening, nobody predicted that there was going to be a population explosion because now all the children are going to be alive in 18 years. And therefore, there's going to be mass demand for jobs, for infrastructure. Nobody thought about that. Yes, it was a problem that they were solving. Fine. But then that problem created another problem 30 years later. So I was looking for Africa's futurists. Who are those in the 1990s who were designing for 2025? And the more I started looking for African futurists, the more I found myself going back in time and finding the bodies of work of African philosophers. Actually, I found going back to the 1960s, all these fantastic manifestos and scenario planning ahead of time. And the more I found myself finding that, the more I realized that going into the future kind of went backwards. I didn't have the terminology for that then, but now I do. Whether it's forecasting, scenario planning, wild carding, all of that, the future draws a lot of its inspiration from the past. I think that was the point where I truly said I would love to position myself as an African futurist. And then battling that up with that same question is, where is Africa's history? Because I was trying to create for the future, and then I would find myself going backwards. And the more I went backwards, the more I found that there's a strong interconnection. And that's exactly where I would want to play. The question, where is African history or where is African heritage, sparked a lot on my foresight journey. This body of work, Keepers of the Forest, still addressing that thing that we have found where it's intangible, it's buried. We are beginning to see these alternative futures methods that are emerging out of our interactions with these indigenous knowledge systems. The future took me to the past and it's now taking me back to the future.
For me, it's a learning journey getting into the foresight space. Sometimes you need to look back a bit before we forge ways to move forward. And for me, it's been a nice revelation learning where our indigenous knowledge systems fit. So it's really a learning journey, finding ways to translate this to audiences out there because it's a bit new.
It's very interesting to encounter various foresight methodologies that are beautiful and artful, similar to the Keepers of the Forest, and yet also functional to a certain extent. This film's more than art. It is beautiful. It is, of course, a work of art, but it is also more than that. You have been able to use it as a call to action. You've encompassed a vastness of knowledge, as well as that call for preservation and that forward-looking aspect. I was wondering if we could speak a bit more about how you're hoping to leverage this work to influence policy and public awareness, or even funding for Indigenous-led conversation. Is this something that you're actively undertaking? Is this something that's in the works? Just wondering if you could speak a bit more about how this film could be that call to action to others in this space.
The elements are definitely in the works. I'm a traditional researcher, and one of the things that I've seen in the knowledge economy is we are living at very interesting times where you're competing with all formats of knowledge dissemination, but also in the traditional academic format where there's research papers published, where there is conferences. Oftentimes, there is a massive disconnect between the importance of the message and the message that needs to be told. And I think this is something that I think media has tried to craft for a very long time. From my experience, I would say we are largely shaped by what we see, what we read, and what we hear. And fundamentally, that's at the forefront of the media landscape. So for topics that are as complex as climate change and trying to rally people to, first of all, understand what this thing is, but also to be interested enough to participate in discourse, you need to meet people in the formats that they would best resonate with. And I think, as I said before, audiovisual content does it very well. It has to be emotive. And VR does that. For complex topics, demystifying things, storytelling allows us to translate complex narratives into something that is emotive enough and relatable enough for every other person. I think that's really why we're using this as a storytelling tool, because there's thousands of documentation that has been written, but they are not being shared, not understood, not fully appreciated. And we hope that this medium, which is a storytelling medium, can help bridge that gap. In terms of advocacy, we are right now really looking for potential partners in all formats, trying to lobby and trying to get people, whether it's from public service, from the private sector, whether it's grassroots community groups and organizations or NGOs, to buy in and then use this as an instrument to facilitate the storytelling around climate change. In a nutshell, that's what we're really trying to do, largely seeking partnerships, recognizing that this is not work that we can do alone. And we're trying to get this body of work in the rooms that it deserves to be in the rooms and tables where decisions are being made. And we hope that those potential collaborations can come to life. We're really open and exploring potential partnerships with anybody who would be keen on adopting this new instrument as a tool for advocacy around climate change conservation, specifically in the alternative knowledge.
As Lorna said, Vera is very emotive. I started a series capturing the reactions of people after the experience. We have a common saying, show don't tell. And the reactions are priceless. After people have watched it, it speaks for themselves, the emotional impact it has. I'll be dropping a short series on our socials called Inside the Headset. And it's people's reactions from them experiencing the story. It's really an amazing tool to get people's attention in an emotive way. And we hoping we can get many people to experience the story and spark conversations around it.
That's wonderful. And that was actually one of my questions around the reactions that viewers might have had to the film. We will make sure that we drop the link to that reaction video that you're sharing in the show notes. Is there anything about the reception that surprised you? Did you imagine that people would be receiving it in this way? How did it feel when you put it into the world and people started to have their eyes on it?
The reactions are still coming, but recently I met a theater director and they are not into VR or anything. And they watched it and they just kept saying they were blown and they will share what they think it can do for theater. Many people are just amazed to see that stories can be experienced beyond a traditional way. Stories can be massive and certain stories need to be massive. So it's an amazing way to tell impact stories. Also, many people are just amazed to see the possibilities of pushing boundaries. We're really just getting amazing reactions. It's really interesting. Or storytellers.
As I said initially, for a lot of us in the global south and largely on the continent, sub-Saharan technologies have gone ahead of us and we only seem to play catch up. But now we have a buffet of mediums of storytelling and it's a convergence of multiple disciplines. You have storytellers, you have gamers, you have animators, you have impact producers and impact storytellers. But then at the end of the day, you have everybody just really looking at this thing which the rules haven't set yet. Everybody's experimenting. It's an open playground that invites all of us to push the boundaries of creative expression. I think the reason why virtual reality resonates a lot with storytellers, especially in our context, is because of its massive format. And now also artificial intelligence brings in a metaphoric similarity with our natural context of storytelling. AI for us can also be African intelligence, ancestral intelligence, Asian intelligence. And then when you merge it with these new formats of storytelling, it's absolutely powerful because traditionally we were already immersive and emotive storytellers. And now we have tools that are lighting up bulbs and saying that's the closest to what we already were culturally. They just happen to be technologies or tools or instruments now. But also, in addition to that, I think there's the general excitement, as Emma said, from the traditional filmmaking landscape that we can now tinker when the tool and the technology is still young. We have never had that before. Now there is access. The space has been democratized so wonderfully that everybody has a place on the stage. As Emma said, for us, it's big on collaboration. African traditions were always Bata, Ubuntu, I am because you are. So because we are through Keepers of the Forest, other storytellers now begin to get the confidence that they too can be, and we are walking that journey with them as part of our AR labs, AI lab, and we have also created a VR production lab for filmmakers because there's a lot of interest there. Going back to impact producing, the one that has completely blown my mind was the response from children and young people. Because of the purity and fantasy, the world is not limited with talent, it's just opportunities. And I think for us, our job is really hand that over to a new generation who will then become the impact storytellers. Unlocking the sense of wonder, the sense of imagination when they experience this versus when they read it. For me, the absolute favorite thing in this journey is that child who's going to walk away and know that the world is their oyster and they have equal stake in the game as any other child around the world. For me, those are the most memorable responses that we have gathered from our viewers.
There's a project we might be working on with the Uganda Museum. There's artifacts that were taken to Cambridge 50 years ago, and everyone's trying to get all their artifacts back. So they have been loaned back to us for 3 years. Some people reached out and figured we need to find a way to exhibit these and find a way for people to see. They are sensitive, they can't physically move them around. And that's where we come in and document. This is where we've been preaching why we need to use the tech. Because if we don't get them back, there's so many other layers we can put back together. We can't use this technology to capture them in VR, get some interactive formats, and add some audio. It's providing a very critical solution to experience these before they take them back. We hope to see how that goes. We will document the whole process. If you get access to a VR headset, we have an updated video version that you can experience. It's wild.
I would love that. How could people view the film?
We are scouting for festivals to widen reach, regional, global festivals. We feel this is a story the world can learn from. So we are trying to get into as many as possible, and we're looking for partners who can bring the experiences, or even remotely. The beauty of the tech is you can experience it immersively if you have the setup. Locally, we're also trying to get into schools, inspire the next generation of future conservationists. Many of them can't visit the forest now, so it's a great virtual tour. It's both a virtual tourism tool and education tool.
That's wonderful. So, throwing it out there, if there's any educators or partners or interested collaborators among our listeners, the call out is there to reach out to Emma and Lorna and help spread the word. It sounds like it began with the film, but now you are doing a significant amount outside of the film too with other institutions. You mentioned the work you're doing with the museum and other ways that you're able to leverage this technology and this intersection of culture and tech and future. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about your organization for interested listeners, how that's unfolding and what that looks like.
We're growing and moving very fast. KeepersXR is an immersive storytelling studio, extended reality studio, doing VR productions, AR, and we will soon be getting into a bit of gaming. We have extensions of the film that would be great for a game. So that's a very near possibility. But also getting into the foresight space, we see where these tools play. We're getting into work around cultural and diplomacy and advocacy around climate and heritage. So we're growing into a few other areas.
We're really big on tech experimentation, like bringing past, present, future together, really making sure that Africa has skin in the game in this super fast landscape that we're dealing with, specifically culture diplomacy and advocacy. We're really big on amplifying that element, knowing that right now contemporary culture and global culture is largely being shaped by the African culture outputs, whether it's fashion, music, film. We also want to integrate these two worlds
the digital economy, the future of the creator economy, and as an instrument to really shape Africa's culture diplomacy.
Thank you both so much on behalf of the Futures Hub podcast and our listeners. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mia, and the whole Futures Hub team for giving us a platform to share our work and for being really kind, really incredible work that you're doing. We are absolutely rooting for you, the same breadth that you have rooted for us. And we really look forward to exploring any other formats of collaboration. So again, thank you so much on behalf of KeepersXR. This has been an absolute delight.
Thank you, Mia, for having us and highlighting our work. Look out for our socials. We keep sharing our journey, development, and experiments on our socials. We're also open to any creatives who would like to chat. Please feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you both. And there you have it, folks. That was Lorna and Emmanuel, the visionary minds behind KeepersXR and their VR film, Keepers of the Forest, The Batwa Legacy. I loved hearing how Lorna and Emmanuel's work bridges ancestral knowledge and emerging technology, and how storytelling itself becomes a tool for foresight, advocacy, and imagination. One of the statements that particularly struck me was when Lorna stated, "When an elder dies, a library burns with them." Projects like theirs remind us that the future depends on how we protect and honor those who have come before us and those who come after us. If you'd like to follow Lorna and Emmanuel's journey or explore partnership opportunities, be sure to visit KeepersXR online and on social media. They're sharing updates, behind-the-scenes stories, and reaction videos from viewers around the world. And if you're an educator, policymaker, or creative looking to collaborate, be sure to reach out. Lorna and Emmanuel made it clear that they're open to new partnerships that would help this work reach more communities. You can also find all the resources and information mentioned in the show notes on futureshub.ca. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or share it with someone who's interested in storytelling, futures, emergent technology, or taking care of our planet. To help us bring more people into this conversation about the futures we can co-create, tag us on Instagram or LinkedIn, share your thoughts, and let's keep the discussion going about how we can shape better futures together. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Futures Hub so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep imagining, keep co-creating, and keep working towards those better futures for all.